show someone the thing, the essay, the painting, the weird little app, whatever it is you've been building alone at your kitchen table for the last 6 months, and they say, "Oh, nice," in that tone. Not the tone of someone who hated it. That would almost be a relief, honestly, because at least you'd have something to argue with. No, it's the other tone. The one that means they have no idea what they just looked at, and they're being kind enough not to say so. That's a specific kind of lonely. Not sad exactly, just unwitnessed. The thing lives in your head, fully formed, and you hand someone a version of it, and they see glass where you meant to hand them a jar with something alive inside. I don't think this is rare. I think almost anyone who's tried to make something even slightly new has felt it at some point. And I don't mean misunderstood genius in the dramatic self-mythologizing sense. I mean something much more boring and much more universal. New things often show up before anyone's built the words for them yet. The frame isn't there. So you're standing there holding a shape, trying to describe it with language built for other shapes, and it just doesn't quite work. And you can see it not quite working on the other person's face in real time. Melville is the example everyone reaches for, and honestly, for good reason. Moby Dick came out to a shrug, modest sales, mixed reviews, and then Melville spent the back half of his life working a customs job in relative obscurity. He died in 1891, having no idea the book would eventually be treated as one of the great American novels. That didn't really happen until the 1920s, decades later, during what people now call the Melville Revival. He just missed it. The vindication happened, but he wasn't there for it. That's the detail that actually gets me. Not that the work eventually landed, but that the loneliness never resolved for him personally. It just ran out the clock. Or Van Gogh, who by most counts sold one painting in his lifetime. One. Meanwhile, the guy produced something like 900 paintings and over 1,000 works on paper in about a decade, writing constant letters to his brother Theo trying to explain what he was even going for, that a wheat field could hold both grief and this insane aliveness at the same time. Nobody around him had the eyes for it. Not because people were cruel, mostly, but because the work was speaking in a dialect nobody had learned to hear yet. He died thinking he'd failed. The market just hadn't caught up to whatever was happening in his nervous system. Fine, those are the extreme, oft-repeated cases. The ones that get retold because they're almost too sad to sit with. But you don't need to be Van Gogh to know this feeling. You just need to have tried explaining a half-formed idea to someone who loves you and watch their face do the thing faces do when they're trying to look like they're following along. It doesn't have to be historical either. Talk to anyone building something quietly right now. A niche newsletter, a strange little product, a first novel doing the rounds with editors, and they'll tell you some version of the same story. You explain the thing 3 different ways to 3 different people and get 3 different blank, polite nods. Eventually you stop explaining it at dinner parties altogether and just say, "It's a project," and change the subject. Because the alternative is watching someone's eyes glaze over mid-sentence while you try to defend a shape they can't see yet. And this part isn't just a writer being precious about her feelings, there's actual research behind it. Jennifer Meller, Shimul Melwani, and Jack Goncalo ran a set of studies back in 2011 on what they called a bias against creativity. And the finding was almost funny in how backwards it is. People say they want originality, and then their brains flinch from it the moment it shows up, especially under any kind of uncertainty. Novelty reads as a low-grade threat. It's harder to categorize, and our brains like fast categories. So something genuinely new can trigger actual measurable discomfort in the person looking at it. Not dislike, just discomfort, which means sometimes you're not even facing indifference. You're facing a kind of built-in cognitive flinch that has nothing to do with whether the work is good. I think that's why this particular flavor of lonely feels different from plain disappointment. Disappointment is at least a completed transaction. You wanted X, you got Y, there's a shape to the letdown. This is more like speaking a language out loud in a room where nobody else speaks it yet. Nobody's rejecting you. Nobody's even really evaluating you. You're just met with this soft, well-meaning fog. And there's nothing solid to push against. Criticism at least gives you a wall. Incomprehension gives you nothing, just air. Sometimes I think of it as being early to a party. Genuinely awkwardly early, standing in a half-lit room while somebody's still stringing up lights and unfolding chairs dressed for a party that, as far as anyone else is concerned, hasn't started yet. You can practically hear the music that'll be playing in an hour. Right now, though, it's just you and some folding tables. And here's the annoying part. This loneliness rarely announces itself as loneliness. It usually shows up disguised as self-doubt instead. You start wondering, is this actually bad? Or am I just too far inside it to see straight anymore? The way a totally normal word starts looking misspelled if you stare at it long enough. Writers talk about this exact anxiety constantly in workshop. Is it not landing because it's bad, or because it's early? From the inside, those two things can feel exactly identical. Bad work and early work both get met with the same silence. You often can't tell which one you made until much later. Sometimes not ever. There's also a version of this that's less about genius and more about plain old category confusion. When podcasts first showed up, most people had no idea what to call them, let alone why they'd want one. Early adopters were literally explaining the format from scratch to confuse friends for years before it became just a normal thing you casually mentioned listening to on your commute. Nobody doubted the content was fine. They just didn't have a slot in their brain for audio show you download instead of tune into. The idea wasn't ahead of its time in some mystical sense. It was just waiting on infrastructure and habits and a word for itself. That's a much less romantic kind of loneliness than Van Gogh's, but it's the same basic mechanism. The world hadn't built the bin yet. Here's the one thing I find genuinely useful to remember, though. Understanding tends to be a lagging indicator, not a leading one. Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill came out in 1985, sat around as a well-regarded deep cut for decades, and then in 2022, thanks to one very well-placed needle drop on a TV show, it hit number 1 on the Billboard Global Chart. Not a re-release, not a remix, the exact same recording, just finally met by a culture that had built a door for it to walk through. The song hadn't changed even slightly, the room had. None of this makes the actual waiting feel good, to be clear. Knowing Van Gogh eventually got his retrospective does nothing to warm up a cold room in the present tense while you're the one sitting in it. But there's something at least a little steadying in knowing the loneliness itself isn't a verdict. It's not proof of anything. It's just what being early feels like from the inside, which is a timing problem, not a character flaw, and timing problems have this odd way of resolving themselves eventually, usually for reasons that have nothing to do with whether the work was actually any good. The hard part, maybe the actual craft of it, underneath everything else, is building the room before anyone believes there's a room there at all. Talking in the not yet language out loud, even if it's just to yourself. Trusting that you're building fluency even when nobody's around yet to talk back. Because eventually, sometimes far too late, sometimes right on time, and every once in a while, if you're lucky, while you're still around to hear it, somebody walks in and says the sentence you've been waiting for this entire time. Oh, I get it now, and it turns out the room was there all along. You just had to keep a light on in it until someone else could finally see.